the city. His luxury mansion, his cold silence, and the way no one ever stayed in his house for too long. But the night he refused to let his maid go home changed everything, and what happened before sunrise left him in tears. It started like any other evening in the grand house that stood at the edge of the hill. The lights were always on, even when the rooms felt empty. Mr. Adrian Hale was a wealthy businessman, respected in public, distant in private. People admired his success, but they whispered about his loneliness. After his wife passed away 3 years ago, he had become a man of routine and walls. Emotional walls no one could cross. The only person who moved quietly through those walls was Mira, his maid. Mira had worked in the mansion for almost a year. She was simple, kind, and never asked unnecessary questions. Every evening at exactly 8, she would finish her work, gather a small bag, and walk to the bus stop down the hill. Adrian barely noticed her most days. To him, she was part of the background, like the ticking clock or the polished floors. But that night was different. A storm had rolled in without warning. Thunder shook the windows, and rain poured down in heavy sheets. The power flickered once, then again. Mira had just finished washing the last of the dinner dishes when Adrian's voice echoed from the living room. "Don't leave tonight." She froze. At first, she thought she misheard him. He had never spoken more than a few words to her at a time. Slowly, she stepped into the doorway. He was standing near the window, staring into darkness outside. "The roads aren't safe," he said quietly. "Stay here tonight." The request hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Mira felt her heart race. She had never stayed past her shift. She had responsibilities at home, a younger brother waiting for her, a neighbor who checked on them. But the storm outside was fierce, and something in Adrian's voice didn't sound like authority. It sounded fragile. She nodded softly. That simple decision set the stage for a night neither of them would forget. As the hours passed, the mansion felt different. Without the usual routine of her leaving, the silence grew louder. Adrian sat in the dim light, restless. Mira noticed he hadn't eaten much. She noticed the unopened letters on the table. She noticed a photograph he kept turning face down whenever he walked past it. For the first time, she saw not a rich man, but a broken one. And when midnight came, a sudden sound from upstairs shattered the quiet. A crash, followed by something that made Myra's blood run cold. Adrian's face turned pale. "Stay here," he whispered, his voice trembling. But she didn't, because what was waiting behind that closed door upstairs was not just a secret from his past. It was the reason he had begged her to stay. And before the night ended, the truth would bring the powerful man to his knees. Mira ignored his warning and slowly stepped toward the staircase. The hallway felt colder than before, as if the storm outside had somehow found its way inside the mansion. Another faint sound came from upstairs, not loud, but clear enough to know it wasn't the wind. Adrian moved quickly past her. "I said stay here," he repeated, but there was no anger in his voice, only fear. That was what unsettled Mira the most. Powerful men were not supposed to sound afraid. The lights flickered again as they reached the top of the stairs. The long corridor stretched ahead, lined with closed doors that were always locked. Mira had cleaned every corner of the house, except this floor. Adrian never allowed anyone upstairs. It was understood without words. Another soft thud came from the last room at the end. Adrian stopped walking. For a moment, he simply stood there, staring at the door. His hand trembled slightly before he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key. Mira noticed how tightly he held it, like it was more than just metal, like it carried years of weight. "I should have handled this earlier," he muttered under his breath. Mira didn't ask what he meant. She could feel that whatever was behind that door was not danger in the usual sense. It was something deeper, something personal. The door slowly creaked open. From where she stood, she could only see shadows and outlines. The room was dim, lit by a single lamp near the window. Nothing seemed broken. Nothing seemed out of place. And yet, the tension in Adrian's shoulders did not ease. He stepped inside first. Mira hesitated, then followed quietly. The room was not what she expected. It wasn't an office or a storage room. It looked untouched, frozen in time. A neatly made bed, a bookshelf filled with novels. A soft blue blanket folded at the edge. On the desk near the window sat a framed photo, the same one he always turned face down downstairs. It was a child's room. Mira felt her chest tighten. On the floor near the bed lay a small wooden music box. It must have fallen from the shelf. That was the crash they had heard. But what truly made the silence heavy was the soft melody now playing from it. Slow, delicate, almost haunting. Adrian bent down and picked it up carefully, as if it might break again. His hands were shaking. She loved this song, he said quietly. It was the first time he had spoken about anyone from his past. Mira didn't know what to say. She had heard rumors from neighbors that the rich man once had a daughter, that after his wife passed away, something else happened. But no one knew details. The mansion became quieter after that. The laughter disappeared. I locked this room, Adrian continued, staring at the music box. I thought if I kept it closed, I could control the memories. The storm outside roared louder, rain hitting the windows like restless fingers. Mira looked around the room again. It wasn't abandoned. It was preserved, like he was waiting. Why tonight? She asked softly before she could stop herself. Adrian's jaw tightened. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the closet and opened it slowly. Inside hung small dresses, untouched, protected by plastic covers. Beneath them was something Mira hadn't noticed before, a small suitcase. Old, worn, packed. My daughter didn't disappear the day everyone thinks she did, he finally said. Mira felt her heart skip. She was here, he whispered, in this house. Another loud crack of thunder shook the windows, and the power suddenly went out. The room fell into darkness, except for the faint light of lightning flashing through the glass. And in that brief flash, Mira saw something move near the doorway. She wasn't sure if it was a shadow or someone standing there. Her breath caught in her throat, because whatever secret this rich man had locked away was not finished with him. And tonight, it felt like it had come back. The lightning faded, and the room dropped back into darkness. Myra's heart pounded so loudly, she was sure Adrian could hear it. She gripped the edge of the desk, forcing her eyes toward the doorway again. There was nothing there now, just the open door, the long hallway beyond it, silent. Did you see that? She whispered. Adrian didn't answer right away. He was staring at the same spot, his breathing uneven. For a second, she saw something in his expression that didn't look like fear of a stranger. It looked like recognition. The power goes out sometimes during storms, he said finally, but his voice lacked confidence. Another flash of lightning lit the room, and this time the doorway was empty, completely empty. Still, the feeling remained. Mira swallowed. You said your daughter was here. What did you mean? Adrian closed the closet slowly, as if sealing away the sight of the small suitcase again. He walked toward the window and pulled the curtains aside slightly, looking down at the rain-soaked driveway below. Everyone believed she ran away after her mother died. He said quietly that she couldn't handle the grief, that I was too busy with business meetings and investments to notice. He let out a bitter breath. The truth is, I asked her to stay home that night, just like I asked you. The words hung heavy between them. Mira felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. Why? She was upset, he said. We argued. She wanted to leave, to stay with her aunt for a few days. I told her no. I said the roads weren't safe. I said she needed to stay here. His voice cracked slightly. And in the morning, she was gone. The music box in his hand had stopped playing, but he still held it tightly. Mira could see guilt written across his face. Not the guilt of something violent, the guilt of regret, of words spoken in anger, of control held too tightly. Did you look for her? Mira asked softly. I searched everywhere, he replied. I hired private investigators. I used every connection I had, but there were no signs, no calls, no messages. It was like she walked out of this house and disappeared into thin air. Outside, the wind howled against the windows, almost like a distant cry. Myra's mind raced. The packed suitcase in the closet, the preserve room, the way he never allowed anyone upstairs. It didn't feel like a crime scene. It felt like a father frozen in time, waiting for a door to open again. Then why keep the suitcase here? She asked. Adrian hesitated. Because it was packed before she vanished, he said. She was planning to leave. I just didn't know when. A heavy silence followed. Mira stepped closer to the doorway, peering into the hallway again. The mansion felt different now, less like a place of luxury and more like a place holding its breath. She had worked here for a year, dusting shelves, polishing floors, cooking meals in silence. But she had never felt the weight of its history like this. And then she remembered something. Sir, she said slowly, earlier this evening, before the storm got worse, I thought I heard a phone ringing upstairs. Adrian turned sharply. That's impossible. There's no phone line connected to this floor, right? She asked. He shook his head. I had it disconnected after she disappeared. Another low sound echoed faintly through the corridor. Not a crash this time. Not thunder. It sounded like a vibration. Both of them froze. It came again, brief, subtle, unmistakable. From inside the room. Adrian's face drained of color. The sound wasn't coming from a hallway. It was coming from somewhere much closer. Myra's eyes slowly shifted toward the closet. The small suitcase. The vibration stopped as suddenly as it had begun. Neither of them moved. Because if something inside that old, packed suitcase was still active after all these years, then the past Adrian had tried to lock away was not only alive. It was trying to be heard. The silence after the vibration felt louder than the storm outside. Mira stared at the suitcase as if it might move again. Adrian didn't blink. He looked like a man facing a ghost he had tried to bury with money, power, and locked doors. It can't be, he whispered. But they had both heard it. Another faint vibration trembled through the wooden floor. Short, controlled, real. Mira stepped back instinctively. There's something inside. Adrian's hand tightened around the music box until his knuckles turned white. For years he had kept that suitcase untouched, like a sacred object. Now it felt like a ticking clock. The room has been locked, he said, almost to himself. No one comes up here. Myra's thoughts raced. She cleaned the house every day. The security system was strict. Cameras covered the entrance and the driveway. The gates were always locked. If someone had entered, they would know. Unless... Does anyone else have a key? She asked carefully. Adrian didn't answer at first. His eyes were fixed on the closet door. My brother used to, he finally said, but we haven't spoken in years. The tension thickened. Another flash of lightning filled the room, casting sharp shadows on the walls. For a split second, Mira felt as if the preserved child's room was watching them, waiting. The vibration came again. Longer this time. There was no doubt now. It was coming from inside the suitcase. Adrian moved slowly toward the closet. Every step seemed heavy, like he was walking through memories instead of air. Mira stayed close behind him, unsure whether she was there as a maid, a witness, or the only person keeping him steady. He reached the closet handle, but stopped inches away. If this is some kind of cruel joke, he murmured. Or maybe it's not, Mira said softly. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since she had started working in his mansion. Not as staff, not as background, but as a person standing beside him in a moment that could change everything. You don't understand, he said. The night she disappeared, her phone was never found. Myra's breath caught. Are you saying? I'm saying, he interrupted, his voice shaking. If there's a phone inside that suitcase, then someone put it there. The storm outside intensified, rain slamming against the windows like urgent fists. The power flickered again, but didn't fully die. The dim lamp in the corner glowed weakly, barely lighting the closet door. The vibration started once more. This time it didn't stop. It continued, steady and persistent, like a call that refused to be ignored. Mira felt goosebumps rise along her arms. Whoever was calling believed someone would answer. Adrian finally grabbed the handle and pulled the closet door open. The small suitcase sat exactly where it had for years, untouched, covered in a thin layer of dust, and yet it was trembling slightly against the wooden floor. The sound was coming from inside. His breathing grew heavier. The confident businessman, the rich man everyone admired, looked like a father on the edge of collapse. Open it, Mira whispered before she could stop herself. He knelt down slowly. His hands hovered over the suitcase, hesitating. The metal latches looked simple, but in that moment, they felt impossible. The vibration stopped. Complete silence filled the room. Adrian closed his eyes for a second, gathering courage. Then, with trembling fingers, he flipped the first latch. A sharp click echoed in the quiet space. He reached for the second latch. Before he could touch it, the phone inside started ringing, not vibrating. Ringing. A clear, unmistakable ringtone that cut through the storm, through the years of silence, through the guilt he had carried every single day. Myra's heart pounded so hard she thought she might faint. Adrian froze, staring at the suitcase as the ringtone continued. Because if that phone truly belonged to his missing daughter, then whoever was calling knew something no one else did. And the next sound that came from that suitcase would either break him completely or bring back a truth he wasn't ready to face. The ringtone kept echoing through the small bedroom, sharp and impossible to ignore. Adrian stared at the suitcase like it might explode. Mira felt frozen, caught between fear and something that felt almost like hope. "Answer it," she whispered. Adrian swallowed hard. His hands trembled as he slowly unclipped the second latch. The ringing continued, steady, patient. When he lifted the lid, a faint smell of old fabric and dust rose into the air. Inside were neatly folded clothes, small sweaters, a scarf, a worn-out teddy bear. And beneath them, glowing faintly in the darkness, was a mobile phone. It looked old, the kind that had been popular years ago. The screen lit up the inside of the suitcase with a pale blue light. The caller ID made Adrian's breath stop. It wasn't a name. It was one word. Home. The ringing stopped before he could touch it. Silence swallowed the room again. Mira felt her throat tighten. "Call it back." Adrian hesitated only a second before picking up the phone. His fingers hovered over the screen. It showed no recent call history. No messages. The battery indicator blinked red, as if it had just come back to life. "This phone hasn't been charged in years," he whispered. As if responding to his voice, the screen suddenly changed. A message notification appeared. "Unknown number. You shouldn't have opened it tonight." Mira gasped softly. Adrian's face drained of color. His first instinct was to look around the room, then toward the hallway. The mansion no longer felt empty. It felt watched. "Who is this?" he typed quickly, his hands shaking. The reply came almost instantly. "Ask yourself why she wanted to leave." The air felt heavier. Myra's mind raced back to what he had confessed earlier. The argument, the control, the packed suitcase. Adrian stared at the message as if it were a mirror reflecting something he didn't want to see. Another notification appeared. "You told her she was safer inside this house." Mira slowly stepped backward, her eyes moving from the phone to Adrian. "You said that to her?" she asked quietly. He nodded, barely breathing. "The night before she disappeared." The phone vibrated again. "She tried to tell you the truth." Adrian's knees nearly gave out. He sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, gripping the device like it might vanish. "What truth?" he whispered to the screen. For a long second, there was no response. Then 3 dots appeared, as if someone was typing. The storm outside roared louder, lightning flashing across the window. In that brief white light, Mira noticed something else on the desk she hadn't seen before. A small security monitor, unplugged but still connected to hidden cameras. Her stomach dropped. "Sir, do you still have the old camera system connected in this house?" Adrian looked up slowly. "I never removed it." The phone buzzed again. You were not the only one she was afraid of losing. The words didn't accuse him of harm. They accused him of blindness. And then another message came. Check the driveway camera. 11:47 p.m., the night she left. Adrian and Mira locked eyes. Neither of them had ever reviewed that footage in detail. The police had taken copies. The investigators had searched. But what if something had been missed? The phone screen flickered again. "If you want answers, come downstairs." Alone. Mira felt the temperature in the room drop. Alone. Adrian slowly stood up. The powerful businessman, the rich man who controlled boardrooms and million-dollar deals, now looked like a father stepping into the unknown. "I'm not letting you go alone," Mira said firmly. He looked at her, torn between fear and determination. Another vibration. "Hurry!" And then the screen went black. The battery died. The room fell silent except for the pounding storm. Adrian closed a suitcase slowly, his hand steadier now, not because he was calm, but because something inside him had shifted. For years he had lived with regret. Tonight, someone was forcing him to face it. The mansion no longer felt like a place of memories. It felt like a stage. And whatever was waiting downstairs wasn't just holding secrets about his missing daughter. It was about to reveal how much of the story had been carefully planned. Mira stepped toward the door as Adrian moved into the hallway. Because if someone had access to that phone and to the old security cameras, then this wasn't just about the past. It meant someone had been inside the mansion long before the storm began. Adrian moved down the staircase slowly, every step echoing through the silent mansion. The storm outside had started to calm, but inside the house, the tension felt stronger than ever. Mira stayed close behind him, ignoring the message that had ordered him to come alone. This was no longer about employer and maid. It was about truth. When they reached the living room, the large television screen flickered on by itself. Both of them froze. The old security system booted up, lines of static crossing the screen before settling on a paused image. The date stamp in the corner made Adrian's chest tighten. 11:47 p.m., the night his daughter disappeared. The image showed the driveway, rain falling, the front gate closed. Then the footage began to play. Mira watched carefully as a younger version of Adrian stepped into view, pacing near the entrance. Minutes later, the front door opened again. A small figure stepped outside, holding something close to her chest. The suitcase. Adrian's breathing became uneven. She left on her own. But the footage didn't end there. As the girl reached the gate, headlights suddenly flashed from the side road. Not from inside the property, but beyond it. A car had been parked just out of camera range. The gate slowly opened from the outside. Myra's eyes widened. Someone was waiting. Adrian stepped closer to the screen, his face pale. The footage zoomed slightly, as if someone had enhanced it. A man stepped out of the car, his face partially visible under the streetlight. Adrian staggered backward. My brother. The room felt like it tilted. His brother had always disagreed with how Adrian raised his daughter. They had argued often about control, about freedom. But Adrian never imagined this. The footage showed the man kneeling in front of the girl, speaking gently. She hesitated for a moment, then walked toward him. The car door opened. She got inside. The car drove away. Adrian collapsed into a chair, tears finally spilling down his face. She didn't disappear. She chose to leave with him. Mira placed a hand on his shoulder. Maybe she felt unheard. The television screen changed again. A live video feed appeared. The same driveway. Present time. A car slowly rolled toward the gate. Adrian's heart nearly stopped. The gate opened. The car entered the property. Headlights cut through the darkness as the engine turned off. The driver's door opened first. His brother stepped out, older now, his expression serious but not hostile. Then the passenger door opened. A young woman stepped out. Adrian's breath caught. She looked older, stronger, but her eyes were the same. His daughter. For a moment, no one moved. The years of silence, regret, and misunderstanding seemed to stand between them like invisible walls. The front door slowly opened as Adrian stepped outside, rain still dripping from a roof. He didn't speak at first. He couldn't. His daughter walked toward him, her voice steady. I wasn't kidnapped, she said softly. Uncle didn't take me. I called him. Adrian's face crumbled. I thought you hated me, he whispered. I didn't hate you, she replied. I just couldn't breathe here anymore. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth and control, suddenly felt small. His brother stepped forward. She asked me not to tell you where she was. She needed time. Adrian wiped his tears, nodding slowly. All these years, I thought I failed you. You did, she said honestly, but without anger. But that doesn't mean it's too late. The storm clouds above began to break, a thin line of moonlight appearing between them. For the first time, Adrian didn't look like a rich, powerful man. He looked like a father who had been given a second chance. Mira watched quietly from the doorway, her own eyes filled with emotion. The mystery of the missing daughter was solved. The hidden phone, the old footage, the messages, they had all been part of one carefully planned moment. His daughter had arranged it. She had placed the phone in the suitcase earlier that day, with help from her uncle. She had wanted her father to face the truth before seeing her again, to confront the locker room, to confront his guilt. But as Adrian stepped forward to hug her, his daughter's expression shifted slightly. "There's one more thing," she said gently. He froze. She looked past him toward the mansion. "I'm not here to move back in." The words hit harder than any storm. "I came to forgive you," she continued, "not to return to who we were." Adrian stood there, tears on his face, understanding finally settling in. He had solved the mystery. He had his daughter back in his life, but not in his house. And as he held her in the driveway of the mansion he once believed kept everyone safe, he realized a real lesson that left him in tears. Love cannot be locked inside walls, no matter how rich or powerful you are. The words stayed in the air long after she said them. Adrian didn't argue. For the first time in years, he didn't try to control the outcome. He simply nodded, the tears on his face no longer hidden. The rich man who once believed his mansion could protect everything he loved finally understood that walls can also push people away. "I don't expect to move back," his daughter continued softly. "I built my own life. I needed space to grow, but I didn't want you to keep living in guilt." Adrian looked at his brother, who stood quietly near the car. There was no anger left in his eyes now, only regret for the years they had lost. "You should have told me," Adrian said, his voice weak but calm. "She made me promise," his brother replied. "She wanted you to realize on your own what went wrong." Adrian gave a slow nod. For years he had blamed everyone but himself, the city, the stress of business, even fate. But tonight, the truth had been laid bare. His daughter hadn't disappeared because of danger. She had left because she felt unheard in her own home. Mira stepped outside, quietly, standing a few feet away. She didn't feel like a maid anymore. She felt like a witness to something deeply human, a father learning humility. The tension that had filled the mansion all night began to dissolve. The storm had passed. The security cameras, the mysterious phone, the old suitcase, they were no longer symbols of fear. They were reminders of a lesson. Adrian turned to his daughter again. "Will you at least visit?" he asked carefully. She smiled faintly. "Yes, but next time, it won't be because of secrets or messages. It'll be because you invited me and I chose to come." Those words mattered. Choice. It was something he had never fully understood before. His brother cleared his throat. "We should go. It's late." Adrian hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged his daughter again, not tightly, not possessively, just enough to say he was grateful. When she pulled away, she looked lighter, like she had finally closed a chapter 2. As the car slowly backed out of the driveway, Adrian stood there watching until the red taillights disappeared down the hill. This time, he wasn't watching someone leave in anger. He was watching someone drive toward her own future. When he finally walked back inside the mansion, it felt different. Quieter, yes, but not suffocating. The child's room upstairs was no longer a shrine to pain. It was a memory he could carry without being crushed by it. He turned to Mira. "You could have left tonight," he said gently. "You asked me to stay," she replied. He gave a small, emotional smile. "I asked because I was afraid of being alone with my thoughts." "And now," she asked. "Now I know being alone isn't the worst thing," he said. "Not listening is." The next morning, Adrian did something no one expected. He unlocked every room in the mansion. He called to have the old security system removed. He opened the curtains and let sunlight flood spaces that had been dark for years. The rich man who once controlled everything had finally learned that love cannot be forced, and protection without trust feels like a prison. Mira gathered her bag that evening as usual. When she reached the door, Adrian spoke again. "You can always leave when your work is done," he said softly, "and you can always come back if you choose." It was a simple sentence, but it carried everything he had learned. And as Mira stepped into the warm daylight, the mansion behind her no longer felt like a place of secrets. It felt like a home finally ready to breathe.